Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to the Ummahpreneur podcast. And today with me, I have a very special guest, which actually some Muslim entrepreneurs are probably going to hear the name and recognize it. My great brother, Peter Gould. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the podcast, bro.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Great to be here, man.
It's
Good to chat.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And just to let people know who might not know about Gould Studio. So Gould Studio is actually Peter Gould's pretty much agency that he's been running since 2003. He's helped businesses and brands that are widely recognized in the Muslim space, such as Salam Sisters and Five Pillars. And he's involved in developing the original concepts from prototypes. And he's really helped some of the most well-known brands in the Islamic economy while working with recognized multinationals. So we're going to dive a little bit more into that and really what it is that he works on, what his experience is like in entrepreneurship. But most importantly, I want to know the man behind the brand today, Peter Gould. So assalamu alaikum. We're going to dive deep into this, and I want to start by having you share what even sparked this idea within you to launch your own design studio.
Hey, thanks so much, Abi. Well, yeah, it's it's been a bit of a journey, and alhamdulillah, I just turned 40 just a couple of weeks ago. So I have to rewind a little bit back to probably when I was in my teens and then early 20s, and just I think at that time, a bit of a fascination with what was the emerging technology, digital tech. The early days of internet, early days of software like Photoshop was such a big deal. You had to have these big old Macs and be able to do like basic things. It was kind of mind blowing. So there was just a curiosity in I guess the technology and the potential for that from a young age, and that basically got me interested in what is digital design, what is the intersection of technology and creating. At the time it was more visual design, so thinking about digital artworks, and eventually that kind of sparked an interest in creating early graphic design kind of experiments in that time. So I enrolled in a design degree, and it kind of snowballed, and then I started freelancing. I started getting some inquiries, and people just, hey, well, I see you kind of mucking around making some stuff over here that looks cool. Can you design us a logo? Can you design us some what was back then early websites? We had this thing called Flash, which was like this animation kind of program that was so it was a bit like the Wild West of the internet. Like anything, there's not really standards. It's not like today where everyone kind of, and there was no mobile, and it was pre-social media. So that got me interested in, just from the technology side and career kind of perspective. I guess what changed that was became more significant in the Alhamdulillah, in my own trajectory and in the direction of the design team, and was my own spiritual journey. So around that same sort of time, I became interested in Islam. Eventually became Muslim when I was about 20. And it started, I was sort of at the same time kind of starting the design business. So the two have always had this kind of relationship. And while sometimes, focusing on working on big mainstream brands and global brands, other times I've been really about, the role of design is really an amana to serve and help people and create beauty and, invite people to meaningful types of experiences. So that's kind of, I guess, where the spark came and how it all began.
I love that, man. I love the hearing the journey and what you've been through in all these stages. And growing up, when you were going through that design degree, did you always know that you were going to do your own thing and tread your own path, or were you not sure? Because I mean, you could have also very well just went and worked for another agency.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's sometimes 20 years later you can easily sort of backfill the story a little bit unintentionally. So I'm trying to sort of remain neutral on that part of history, but I really do think that I had that from a young age, that intention to start some kind of company, or have some I had this idea of like what the space would look like, and what kind of not really what kind of projects, but I guess more like, I use computers to do design. How cool is that? And now it's like, is there any other way? But I had this idea of just the idea of working in graphic design, but specifically, working on a range of projects, which would mean not just working one company. And, but in terms of like, I wouldn't claim that I had this clear kind of vision of like, we're going to have different locations in different cities, and it's going to look like this and be called that. I really didn't know that path, and it's always iteratively transforming. So any business where we are, what get you here may not take you there, so it's always being iterative, and it still is to this day, 20 years later.
Yeah. And during that time in 2003, was it a time where entrepreneurship was a popular concept, or was it a little bit more strange? Because today, of course, entrepreneurship is very much popularized with the power of social media, with so many influencers that are out there promoting this lifestyle. But I'm sure in 2003, the landscape was much different. So what was it like back then when you were getting to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, another great question. So there definitely was entrepreneurship and startups were really associated at that time with Silicon Valley and
Mhm.
tech startups. You'd have that
Yeah.
first sort of wave, and then dot-com kind of boom. So you had companies like Google that were pretty new, and Yahoo and others that were sort of starting to dominate. And then there was a whole there was a bubble, and then there was I sort of came a little bit after that, but it was
Mhm.
pre kind of it was pre Web 2. So it's kind of, before Facebook, before Instagram, before real YouTube was a thing. And so it was a very fertile time. It was very exciting. And entrepreneurship was, I wasn't really familiar with the word so much, or I wasn't around an entrepreneurial culture. I was
Yeah.
based in Sydney, Australia. And I really had to go looking and finding, and really it was more at that time business. Like, I need to learn about business. So I actually enrolled in an MBA. I lasted one semester, a few projects, and I was like, no, I got to get back to my company. Like, I'm going to learn by doing. It was kind of
Mhm.
the thing. And but it was, that sort of thread of being interested in startups really grew and grew and grew, especially as firstly I had some clients that were startups, and I started being around people that were I was like very impressed by, and then really got more heavily interested in, like, lean startups, and the kind of popularization of lean canvas and this movement, especially when I moved to the Bay Area in San Francisco for a while, and really got to be around lots of great entrepreneurs and thinkers. And these days, I'd kind of more think about an entrepreneurial mindset. So
Mhm.
committing to start your own startup is wonderful and exciting, but like everyone will also share, it's incredibly demanding.
Correct.
It's a wild journey if you're going to sign up for that. But by embracing, I think, an entrepreneurial approach to whatever you're working on is very powerful. And I think I've had that for a long time, and I'm sure many others on the podcast have as well.
That actually brings me perfectly to my next question, which I was really excited to ask you, which is, you are going through this journey of building a business at a time where there isn't social media. There aren't all these available amenities and tools that make the journey easier right now, right, than it's ever been before. And you're going through this. And as you mentioned, it's an arduous journey. There are multiple challenges that entrepreneurs face on a daily basis. How did you even find the time to then take some introspection or an introspective look within yourself and go on a personal journey to find Islam and to spiritually discover yourself? Where did you find the time in between building your business?
Yeah, well, I think the spiritual path and the journey that we all face is directly linked to our our daily experiences in our life. It's the
Mhm.
challenges you face or opportunities you're given. You're always reflecting on, sometimes worrying about, other times delighted by. That's directly affects your emotional state, and you're constantly reevaluating your why and your thinking. I think as you mature as well, looking at problems and difficulties in different light, so that now in my my understanding in the Islamic tradition of well, there's a hikmah to it, there's a wisdom to these challenges, even if right when they're happening to you, they're incredibly difficult to face. So I think actually it's just a very natural, organic integration of my trajectory of the creative path and entrepreneurial path and the spiritual path. And I think what I found a little bit missing, though, or I wasn't finding personally, was the discourse and the discussion directly at the intersection of the two. So
Mm.
for example, I was very fortunate to spend time with amazing scholars and thinkers, and spend a lot of time with people that had done traditional study in Mauritania or in Syria or in different places, and benefited from their wisdoms. But all my entrepreneurial kind of design technical knowledge was coming from the leading different design teams. I spent some time at Stanford D School and other places, but I really struggled to find content that was well versed in these two. So that really has become the theme, I think, in my last decade, is like just asking questions from these two spheres of people, two groups of people, and looking for good examples of those that those that do understand those two well, and they
Mhm.
do exist in history. But present day, as you said earlier, I think there's a real flourish of entrepreneurs that are, I call it, like-hearted, or working from the heart, that have this like-hearted vision, not necessarily like-minded, because people might think differently, but like-hearted in their vision for bringing values and wholesomeness to entrepreneurship. So that's really encouraging. I'm really happy to see that transformation.
Yeah, definitely. SubhanAllah. And in that time, you didn't have social media to get clients. You didn't have the tools we have available today. I'm just curious for the people listening, because we might learn a lesson or two. What were your strategies to go and get business back then, right? Where you couldn't just put up a post on Instagram. It was way different. So what were you doing at that time?
Yeah, well, I'll say this: that even in today's hyper digital age, where how many millions of people are living on Discord or living on our social apps every day, it's still always about people. It's always
Mhm.
about people. So early on in my journey, very early on, but long before social, I remember asking different people that ran different businesses, not in design, but just different things. I was always curious, and one of them said, like, well, look, I asked them advice. What's your, you've had a successful business over many years. And I say, well, it's about people. Just remember that, so if you look after people, they'll remember that, and that's true today as, as it was before. So, in those early days, it was a lot of face-to-face meetings and visits. Like, you'd spend a lot of the week, trying to go and meet people and convince them you're not just this, hack university student in design, which I kind of was. Um, and then at the same time, go home and do the work at night and work all night, trying to, figure out, okay, I hope Illustrator doesn't crash. I hope I can make this concept or this packaging to be creative, and then be back on the road the next day and visiting and showing people, like printing things out. Increasingly, that came through, more into email, and that changed things, which was awesome. I mean, I'm sounding really old at this point. I'm just realizing, but that was really the first, like, probably the first few years, and then really, transformed. So I was just fortunate to be put in that time. But it's just those relationships, and alhamdulillah, I feel incredibly blessed. I was just reflecting this morning that some of those relationships, kindle at that time. God sends you people to you, into your life, and I still have those relationships today. And I've had, many instances where 10 years later, a client will come back, or someone will ask for a project, and that might be on a different project or a different brand. But there's a trust there with you as a person that you'll deliver or commit to it, if your team's available to do a good job. And
Yeah.
even though back then the formats and channels might have changed to today,
Mhm.
it's just building those relationships with people.
Yeah, no, I actually think this is amazing advice. And it's what we need to hear more of, because a lot of times we kind of get fooled into thinking, well, now it's all about, being an influencer, and it's all about, creating viral reels and being on TikTok and whatever new social media just popped up. But at the end of the day, and this is something that I really try to drill into my students as well, is that any successful business is only built on successful client results. If your clients aren't getting the result, then you won't have a successful business. And I feel like we're kind of losing that in this day and age, where it's more about the branding and like the face of the business than actually having happy customers on the back end. And within that discussion, tell us about that a little bit. Tell us about branding, and tell us how you work with your clients to help them with their branding. What is it that you do at Gould Studio that is so impactful for these businesses?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the reflection. Well, it's really starting exactly what you said, to come back to first principles or
Mhm.
basics, is that, why are you being approached, and why are you aligned on being together, and knowing that from the outset.
Yeah.
That's really important in setting those kind of expectations. It
Mhm.
can sometimes be a bit open-ended, but there's got to be enough trust that, the individuals know that, listen, I'm really going to work well for you. I'm going to deliver with ahsan, with excellence. Our team is going to bring our craftsmanship to this project, and we're going to ask a certain budget for it. But there's a trust that, based on 20 years of doing this for, alhamdulillah, many hundreds of different brands, we're going to really deliver those results, that you expect this growth, or hoping for more awareness here, or a different kind of experience. So in design teams, now, branding is a small piece of this, but really it's a lot of these activities and experiences and interactive experiences that people are looking for. So, for example, last year, we started a campaign for Greenpeace, so a global organization focusing on climate change. They asked us to help with their Ramadan strategy and strategy with Muslim audiences, because they know that globally they have many Muslim constituents, from Indonesia to Istanbul. And they looked and said, look, Gould, we see that you have that kind of awareness and looking at common threads of different Muslim communities globally. Can you help us design to increase our engagement and reach and affect climate action? So Alhamdulillah, we started last year. We had a really successful initial Ramadan experience. We grew the relationship, and this year we've really doubled down on it. We've grown the platform, the activities, the level of people now supporting that, the different kind of influencers that have many millions of followers and now on board, because they've also seen that trajectory of change and growth. So it's really just it's building that relationship. And that's also always tested when things that, if something happens, there's a challenge, there's a server goes down, things happen. So the relationship has really grown through that difficulty as well, and to show professionalism, to show the right approach to whatever the challenge might be, and then celebrate the wins together when you see tens of thousands of young people committing to change their climate based habits during Ramadan. That's a beautiful thing,
100%. Alhamdulillah, definitely. So walk me through this a little bit, because a lot of people might, hear design agency, they might essentially understand like, okay, cool, you're going to help me design a logo, maybe, help me with like my color palette. But I'm sure, and I know this, that you do much more than that. So walk us through, what does your agency actually do with its clients? Because, as you mentioned, you work with Greenpeace and you've worked on this entire campaign. So clearly it's a lot more than just the visuals. So what aspects of design are you actually tackling and working on with your clients?
So we really need to first understand and embrace design is what? Design is change. Design is problem solving. And that's very broad, and it can be done by really anyone with the right mindset. Design as a transformational kind of mindset. So if you bring a kind of designer mindset to something, you're looking at our questions first. Are we solving the right problem? Are we solving it in the right way? So, sometimes that will involve aspects of visual design, like what's the identity, what's the creative communication. That's definitely quite central to most of the projects that we do. But a lot of the time, it's most of the effort is in that strategic approach firsthand. So doing research, understanding who the audiences are, what's actually useful and relevant to them, what's going to resonate with them. Thinking about the customer experience, which is called CX, or user experience called UX, which is more the digital, what's the product side, all of that kind of work, 80% of the success of the project could be just in that thinking and understanding the strategy. That's design, that's strategic design. So when people often think day to day of design, they might think fashion design, visual design, graphic design, interior design. That's great, that's all fine. But really, design in the context of a design team like ours is understanding the problem well, creatively addressing that, bringing the right technology, innovation, but an understanding of the people and what's going to resonate. How many times I think we've all seen is people get in their minds like, I'm going to go build this great app. I've got this idea, what it's going to look like, how it's going to work. And I'll spend 6 months or a year or two building the thing, and then thinking, why isn't it working? I don't have enough marketing. I need funding. But really, they haven't understood the problem in the first instance well, and the people. Is it really solving it? Is it solving the right needs? So strategic design is where we focus first, and oftentimes now we get approached just for that piece, and then the organization might or even have their own visual designers or development designers to actually build out the thing, but they need the strategy first.
Right. So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm really interested in the topic that you just shared, because when you look at design and all its aspects, as you mentioned, it's so much more than the visuals, and it dives into the strategy, the user experience, and pretty much it's like you're designing the journey that the customer will go through, or the person will go through when they're met with this marketing campaign. Or it's really an experience. You're trying to think of what is it that this person will experience, what is it that this person will feel and experience when they go through this marketing sequence, or this business product, or this thing that we're building essentially. And you're then trying to map out, well, this is how we want them to feel, this is all the stages that we have, and looking at your methodology for implementing all this within businesses, looking at your approach. Would you feel that there's any sources of inspiration, or maybe any other entrepreneurs, any other great designers that you look up to, that you pull from when it comes to your own way of doing things?
So in the last probably 5 years in particular, I've been on a little bit of a personal search for who are those leaders and
Mm-hmm.
thinkers and role models that we can ask, that understand the spiritual reality and the faith tradition that we adhere to, and draw our own our own kind of approach to life from, but also understand the potential and the reality of our environment today. We have a very commercial, distracted environment. So many of us are just digitally addicted daily, and that's all by design. All these products have been designed for attention, designed for distraction. We all know that, and it's also something we just live in day to day. And not to mention, on top of that, the continual, very niche targeted advertising that we all kind of experience as well. So the question then becomes, okay, we're obviously partaking in that whether we want to or not. It's just how we live and work and communicate is on digital platforms, for example. So if we are going to take on the amana, the responsibility of creating and stepping into that world, and now creating products and brands and experiences ourselves, are we contributing to the noise and contributing to distraction? Or are we looking at, okay, these are the kind of tools and strategy we know that we need to use to reach people,
Mm-hmm.
but rather than in a manipulative way saying, hey, well, you should really buy this, it'll make your life better. How can we have, as one of my teachers explained it, a way to share our service or product we believe, inshallah, is best fit for purpose? So we think we have a really good product or idea or service that we think is best suited genuinely to the people we want to serve, or the communities we want to uplift or empower, or the organizations that we want to help, inspire their members. So it's reframing design from when I kind of first encountered it, which is very commercial. How do you sell? How do we get more users, more growth? How do we just build on shareholder value? But I kind of think of it now as what is a heart-centered approach. So I've been writing and researching what I call the heart of design. And I've done about 40 interviews in the last few years of a range of entrepreneurs, thinkers, creatives who are really at this intersection of design, entrepreneurship, and spirituality. Inshallah, the book will come out this year. If I can maybe finish it in Ramadan, we'll see.
Amazing, mashallah. What do you plan to call it, if you don't mind me asking?
The Heart of Design.
The Heart of
Well,
Design.
the
Beautiful.
Heart of Design, yeah. So, and alhamdulillah, I've also been teaching some of that content the last couple of years with some programs I've been running as experiments. And alhamdulillah, the feedback's been really positive. It's been a good response. So particularly a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs from around the world have signed up to that, the Heart of Design program. So that one's called the Heart of Design, Design as a Spiritual Practice. And that's a 5-week program that I've just, been sort of running as a bit of learning and to iterate the content.
How did I not know about this?
Yeah.
I want this. Do you still offer this?
Yeah, it is around. I haven't
Okay.
been heavily pushing it but it's people find it. So yeah, theheartofdesign.com
Okay.
is that. And yeah, the next cycle will probably be mid-year. So we just finished one, I think, last month. We'll take a break for Ramadan. And yeah, we should have around 40 to 50 a range of professionals or aspiring entrepreneurs. But I've had alhamdulillah people from Google and Apple join, and others, and they've invited me, alhamdulillah, to give workshops on this to their organization. So in terms of what is a heart-centered approach, and by heart-centered, I usually think about how might we think of the word barakah in the design process, or how might we think of the word ikhlas or niyyah, actively when we're trying to design a product, or when we're trying to think about the strategy of our people and our users. So that's the kind of heart-centeredness of that I'm trying to explore through, kind of reframing design to be more holistic.
I love that. I love that, mashallah. And I'm definitely going to check that out, theheartofdesign.com. So thank you for sharing that with me. So I want to ask you, I'm guessing then that probably when you're looking at brands, one that was really interesting to me that I absolutely loved was Salam Sisters. And I was always wondering, what was the process and the inspiration behind designing brands like this, right? I would love your answer, because I'm guessing now that I'm hearing you, there was definitely a heart-centered design approach when it came to working with a brand like that.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So Salam Sisters has been one of my favorite projects of all time. And it was directly inspired by my two daughters. So I have two girls, and when they're a little younger, they used to play a lot with dolls. They used to, like all younger kids, have interaction with a whole range of brands, like usually Disney, Hasbro, Mattel,
Yeah.
Spin Master. They kind of control the content of what most young people see, with various channels plus YouTube. And then the toy industry is pretty tightly held by these corporations. So I could definitely feel that there wasn't the kind of representation or inclusion. There were not cool Muslim characters in there. And I'm not saying that these brands were anti that or opposed to it, but you just didn't get you just didn't get that representation. It's getting a little better now, by the way, but at the time, no. So initially, I actually created a concept for an app called Salam Sisters, and I put it on Launch Good. I was one of the very first campaigns years ago. I think it's like 2014, pretty early, 2013. I can't remember exactly. And I just thought, well, people like this idea, so I call it Salam Sisters. It was the story of these five girls, and they're different attributes of personality, different cultural backgrounds that were represented. That campaign, people liked it. We built the app. It was very simple, and it was one of my first kind of game design projects. So we didn't really know what we're doing, to be honest. We would, just kind of got to go. But what the value there was the idea and the concept and the stories of these characters. So we took a couple of years and eventually worked then to sort of form a new startup called Zalige that was separate to the studio, which was to focus on, okay, let's get some funding and actually build this properly. So we did. Alhamdulillah, we built them as toys, as big, full size, 18-inch play dolls, and we took them to the world's biggest toy fair, called Spielwarenmesse in Germany. We sold out all the first production. And there's a lot of love for that brand. A lot of hard work on the way, great team, a lot of individual specialists from different countries to help, make something like that happen. So yeah, that to me is an example of really heart-centered design and using, the intersection of entrepreneurship, design, strategy, but also, how do we make a product that people love, that you can put on your shelf and people just have an instant sort of emotional reaction to. And that's what happened. That's why, alhamdulillah, it ended up getting a lot of press and a lot of interest. Continues to this day.
Would you say that the process of seeing something like this come to life is what keeps you going? Because I'm curious to know what makes you tick right now. What is it that keeps you going and keeps that fire inside of you? Because you've been doing this for almost 20 years now, and mashallah, you are not slowing down. What's your secret?
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Look, I think there's no secret. Like, first of all, it's all barakah from God. It is there. You can never claim, success of your own. And if anything that you do is gifted to you.
100%.
At the same time, I asked one of my teachers about this idea of tawakkul, right? Reliance, and something I struggled with for a while to understand. Well, does that mean I have to give like more or surrender more? Like, what's the tension between the two? Like, as an entrepreneur, it becomes very, relevant. It's like, okay, how much do I kind of push and hustle and kind of make this happen versus, no, my rizq is written, and, I just will try a few things and it's really not up to me. So there is this ongoing, creative tension. I think, and we lean into this kind of exploration during the hard design, for example. And one of my teachers said, look, Peter, you understand the definition of tawakkul, but also tawakkul includes using the talents, gifts, and opportunities that God has gifted to you. So using the contacts and people come to you, using your platform, and if you have reach, using your Wi-Fi or your coffee or your location. That's the tawakkul comes through that, right? It's not just this abstract concept. So with that in mind, you have to continually think about the opportunities gifted to the people that come to you. And just the fact that we can have a whole day to breathe and healthily and work with the team, that's a huge amana. So I think we'll be questioned, what are you doing with that? Who are you serving? And that doesn't mean you just, all right, that's it, we're just going to do work for nonprofits and kind of, sit on a mountain. And, it's more, I think the potential for entrepreneurship and design is transformative for our ummah and our global communities. I think it's a really incredible path, but we have to be careful, continually checking our niyyah on, it needs to be commercially sustainable. It needs to be, something that's healthy and wholesome that can benefit and employ many people and impact the world. But, you can't lose your sense of purpose and why. So coming back to your question, I think it's continuing looking at, what I would like to work on that I think needs to be built. So
Mhm.
recently, a Tales of Khayal comic series that we're developing, which, inshallah might be a video game one day, that comes from a place of recognizing that, I really feel we're underserving content, sophisticated, Muslim-inspired creative content. So we should develop that. And that's been the theme, is this continue to look at what problems need to be solved, and
Mm.
can we have some influence on that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But also trying to just be a dad with my 3 kids and be, a husband that's present. Like it's a game of work life integration. And I think the spiritual path is so central to keeping yourself grounded in that journey.
I honestly really feel like that's so beautiful, brother. Like when you put it that way, and even thinking to myself as an entrepreneur and why I built Ummahpreneur in the first place, it definitely stemmed from this place where I felt like there was a gap in the support for Muslim entrepreneurs and the ability for Muslim entrepreneurs to get the inspiration they needed, the information they needed, the value they needed. And so I, alhamdulillah, had that business experience and I built successful businesses. And I said, okay, well, this is the logical next step. Even if I might not be Warren Buffett or someone who's built a $1 billion business, but can I do what I can right now to help support Muslim entrepreneurs in my own way? And hearing you talk about, your why and what is it that drives you, really, subhanallah, it's something that is so Islamic at its core, because at the end of the day, as you mentioned, it's about finding what are gaps within the community, within our society, within the world as a whole, and how can we fill those gaps and bring solutions to the table. And this is at a time where a lot of people who are supposed to be bringing the solutions, such as government organizations and politicians, have failed us. And so now as entrepreneurs, we have taken the mantle and decided, well, can we bring our own solutions? If the solutions won't be given to us, we need to do something about it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's ultimately, it still comes back to people. So how are you
Mhm.
serving people, and the different channels and labels that you can use for that. And again, design is a very broad term. So governments
Mhm.
can design, absolutely. They, all the time. Educational institutions, design all the time. They're designing the programming. They're designing what people are learning. So if you're going to call yourself a design team, you have to be willing to lean into different problems, sometimes with clients that you're servicing, and others, or it might be communities or organizations that you donate time to. And sometimes it's like, okay, no one's asking us to build this or serve people in this way. Bismillah, we're going to try and do it ourselves. All right. And sometimes that's a little bit bold and audacious, and it needs to be sometimes to just
Mhm.
take a little bit of a leap of faith.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do think there is this transformative potential. But I think one thing to remember that one of my teachers reminded me of not so long ago is, especially as entrepreneurs, right, is it, I was talking about something, it's very different. And he goes, Peter, you think you're working on this business and this product and you're talking about this or that, but it's working on you, right? You think you're working on it, it's working on you. And
Mm.
that is a continual reframing of understanding our spiritual path and our entrepreneurial path. They're interconnected in that, we have to be in this state of checking why we're doing it, what we're doing it for. It's an ongoing thing. I've just accepted that, there's this other concept of rida, right, of just grace and acceptance and surrender. And one of my teachers explained rida. I was asking him is, rida is accepting every decision that's ever been made in human history and every decision that will ever be made in the future. That is surrender. I was like, oof, that's like a deep concept, and it kind of grounds you and brings you back to your individual. You can think way too much of what our impact is, and or
Mhm.
overstate that importance. But like you said, it's that starfish principle of like, okay, that story, there's two people walking on the beach and it's full of all these starfish that have washed up, and they're all dying sadly, and these two people are walking, and one guy's like uh and one guy starts picking up one every so often, just throwing it, pick up a starfish, throw it back in the water so it continues to live. And the other guy's like, what are you doing that for? Like, just wasting your time. They're all going to die. And he picks up one, looks at it, throws it back in, and goes, well, save that one. So, it's one at a time, like one at a
Yeah.
time. What are we contributing to? And it's okay to not think of your startup as $1 billion unicorn. Like that's, I
Mhm.
think, the wrong way to think about entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
If that comes, and I've seen that come to entrepreneurs I know, mashallah, have been very successful. But think about just your individual effort, in this constant, in inner dialogue of like, okay, what really am I trying to focus on? And
Mhm.
focusing less on defining that specific outcome that has to be that at all costs, but more, I think of it as more of a transformative process rather than transactional. So it's not like
Mhm.
I build this, I get on the front of Forbes. No,
Mhm.
it's, I start my intention with this, and weekly and daily I'm going to work on this thing and navigate through this towards this distant mountain. But it's transformative. I'm working on it, it's working on me, and
Correct.
inshallah it'll be great for everyone.
Correct. I think one question that I find myself asking every so often as an entrepreneur is, who do I need to be to get to that next step, to achieve that next level? Because within anything you want to build, and especially within business, it is usually not the business itself that is the limitation, but rather you as the business owner, entrepreneur, CEO, and working on yourself to find out what are the areas within you that you should improve on, will then allow you to achieve that next level in your business. And a lot of times it is within us. And so I really find that as an interesting perspective, to look at business as not something that only you work on, but also as something that works on you. I've never thought about that before. When you put it that way, it's very, very eloquent. And I think you're putting words to thoughts that I've always had. I've never really been able to communicate. So I appreciate that. I want to
No,
ask you a
I'm
more,
just, I'm
yeah,
passing it on. This is
100%.
that, it's I'm asking, just, it's always being, and extending on that, it's the
Mm,
sahba, right? It's the companions that you're around that
yeah,
directly influence your thinking and decisions. And it's really important in entrepreneurship, as you would know, to
yeah.
have the right sahba, the right companionship on the path, or you'll be finished really quick. You need them
Hmm.
for resilience, but also to challenge you, critique you. And I have a friend, I call her my strategic auntie, and mashallah, she's very successful. She has, I think, over 40 properties. She's had businesses, but you would just see her making chai and just having very beautiful auntie-like qualities. And she says, Peter, you always need a friend to give you a push when you need it, right? You need a friend to she said, she described the different type of friends you need, and one she said is, you need a friend to give you a kick in the behind when you need
Of
it,
course,
right?
of
And
course.
you do need that. So especially when things look like they're going well, you need to just stay grounded.
Yeah.
So yeah, having that sahba, that mentorship, is essential, I think, to keep us oriented the right way.
100%. I completely agree. I wanted to ask you and take this opportunity to maybe share with our audience some common design mistakes that a lot of entrepreneurs or business owners are making right now. And this could be really in any, within any aspect of design, whether it's the actual design itself, whether it's, as you mentioned, the customer journey design or product design. What are some common mistakes that you're finding right now in the market?
Yeah, I think let's take a look at, there's different parts of that spectrum. So if a lot of
Hmm.
people may be starting out or thinking of building their product or business, will often still think of design in terms of design is the visual activity. Okay, I need
Yeah.
how I brand it and what identity I create. What's my website look like? Those things are important, but they're not as important as you might think in terms of
Hmm.
the hierarchy. They're important. That first impression is important, but people really are ultimately going to be connecting to your product experience, to your brand experience, to the customer journey more broadly. So, for example, I take, let's say, look at something like Lego. I don't love Lego and play with Lego because of the logo, right? The logo is just the logo. It's the gateway to the brand. It
Hmm.
reminds me of that experience. So it has value, but think of, invest your design in your design activity in the product experience, in the brand experience. So what would make someone so delighted to use it, or what's going to make them talk about it to others? It's not going to be like, oh my God, guys, I found this brand. It's so good. Look how good the logo is. Look how good the website is. It's not that. It's the product experience, what it means to them. For a lot of Muslim entrepreneurs, depending on where you're focusing, your effort, if you are thinking about, a Muslim audiences, for example, you have this incredible advantage because already you have this like-hearted alignment with a lot of the customers you're speaking to. For example, if you're talking about different kind of faith-based activities or spiritual aspirations that Muslims might have in Ramadan, at the same time, we have to tread very carefully, because if you're using that to, if you're banking on that to create the value rather than the product itself by saying, hey, look, you're Muslim, buy this thing. Then it becomes just like a Christmas like activity where it's like, hey, I'm gonna sell I'm selling guitars. Yeah, it's Christmas. Here's a guitar sale. Like it's so be careful in what we're designing that we don't completely step outside what those spiritual aspirations are for. I think just coming back to thinking about the design and how people are thinking of it is just don't limit your understanding of design to its visual aspect or the creative activity. Think of it as problem solving at every part of your journey. How you ship products to customers, or how do you deliver online? What is your what do people like when they interact with you through email or through your social channels? That is part of the design process. Every stage of that entire journey, you need to consider and design well, and continually listen to your customers and users, and keep iterating. That's design. Yeah,
100%. It's interesting because it's really this concept, or I would even say this concept, but this framework of listening to feedback and iterating is one of the most basic frameworks in business. It is one of the core elements of business. And it is the one that I will usually find myself repeating most often when working with entrepreneurs. I feel like there's this shift towards really building something that isn't necessarily of value and putting it out to the market, and then working mostly on the branding side, the marketing side. And we're losing the art of working on, as you mentioned, the product design, the customer experience design, and what is the result, what is the feeling, what is the experience of our customers when they use our products and services, which is far more important.
yeah, and you have to put a lot less value on just the idea, right? The idea, people think, I've got this idea, that's it, now I just need to build it and I'm going to be successful, right? That part, just build it, right? I mean, I read even recently a Steve Jobs quote, which always come out on LinkedIn every day, whatever. But it was by someone I really, really respect. He's very successful. He built a digital company that was acquired by Shopify. He's now very senior at Shopify and leads up their Web3 and NFT team, which is really impressive.
Hello.
Anyway,
Nice.
good brother. Actually, he's in Canada there with you. You guys should connect. Anyway, so I've learned a lot of things from him, but it was a Steve Jobs quote that he shared. And it was really just a reminder of like, the idea has value, but it's really in how you build. It's the process of the 5,000 decisions that you need to make to execute along the way to make that actually simple and beautiful and something that people resonate with quickly and simply. That design process, that's the magic, and that takes an incredible amount of work and every other emotion you need to do that successfully.
100%. And I actually wanted to ask you that, but I wasn't sure if I was going to. But I'm like, you know what? Since you mentioned Steve Jobs, I'm going to ask you anyway. So I had it in the back of my mind when you were talking about like your journey through building your agency from the ground up, Gould Studio, and all the different steps that you've been through, mashallah, throughout these years, because you've witnessed the rise of social media as a vehicle and what we currently use now versus when you first started. As you mentioned, it was more word of mouth. It was more, well, it still is about the people, but it was more organic than it is today. And today is much more online. Throughout this journey that you went through, if I recall correctly, was also during a period where Steve Jobs was just releasing the iPhone, right? And it was a revolutionary product. It was a product where when released, it was like, wow, this whole concept. Initially, it was more about technology and about what it could fulfill, and let's make it have 100 use cases. And then Steve Jobs came and he's like, no, the design is to be the idea behind this design is to be as simple as possible, as user friendly as possible, as minimalistic as possible. And that's what the iPhone is going to be. No buttons, right? I want to know, I was very curious to ask you, for you as a designer, looking at that and looking at how, Apple went on to develop, and now become $1 billion company, did that shift your idea of what design is? Because I know for me, I draw a lot of inspiration from that in terms of the way that I would approach anything related to design right now within my company in a more minimalistic way. Really, less is more. Whereas before, I didn't really have that view on things.
So I think Steve Jobs was famous for not listening to user groups, all right, and not
Mhm.
doing these focus groups of what we should do next, right? And this goes a little bit in the face of like, okay, well, what does that mean for user research then? Hang on, you're just saying listen to your customers and what they want and build that. But then Apple, arguably, the most well-known design-driven company in the world, um, they, are famous for seemingly coming out with these genius products. So the understanding there is that what Apple understood really well, and I think Steve personally, from all my readings and people that knew him as well, interacted with him, um, is that, well, they understood very well at that time people wanted 1,000 songs in their pocket, right? That was the promise of the original iPod. It wasn't, hey, we want a device that looks like this with a circle wheel and has this and has an app store that looks like that. Apple designed that product experience, but they understood the product well, the problem, and the timing, and they
Mhm.
continually got that right over that decade, which was amazing to witness, actually, as someone who's designed, had been a always enthusiast in different Apple products over the years. And I was living, for example, in the Bay Area in San Francisco when the iPad came out on day one. So I, just like all these other, like, foolhardy enthusiasts, went out and got the iPad on day one. And now we just sort of, it's funny to even call it the iPad, but right at the time, that
Yeah.
tablet in that form was a really big deal. And I
Yeah.
remember coming back to Australia, like, I had to come back for a month later, and walking into a place, and it was a little bit silly probably, but I would bring it, and my kids would muck around with it, and people would like gather around and go, "Oh, is that the iPad?"
Yeah.
Right? And this is only like 10 years ago or something, like, and tablets are just part of life now at work. You can
Yeah.
imagine school classrooms without them now. So to see that change, and then design led decisions through that process. Of course, they make a lot of decisions that are really unfair.
Mhm.
Apple, very, let's not talk, but I think it's it has, I think, helped for the masses, that it's given people an example of product design and an ecosystem to refer to. So I do
Yeah.
use Apple as examples in my workshops, because people know what I'm talking about, and they go, "Oh yeah, so it's a design mature organization. Whether you get something repaired, or whether you go into the store, or whether you download something from the app store, there is a feeling of design integration and maturity that they've considered every step of that process." And even the people that supply Apple or work with them, or the employees, all parts of that process, or when you order a part, where it comes from and what part of supply chain, it's got a very high level of design integration and design maturity. So
Mhm.
the question in the learning for us with our much smaller organizations is, what level of design maturity could we achieve even in our small scale, even if you have, say, you know 2 employees or 20 or 50, is how well have we designed the onboarding process for new employees? How well have we designed the experience by which our customers get their invoices, for example? This is applying design thinking, problem solving to each of those stages, and you'll start looking and feeling like a more organized,
Mhm.
a more professional organization, just through that process.
Yeah, definitely. What's in store for Gold Studio in the future? What's next for you also as an entrepreneur? Is there anything that you're working on personally that you can share with us?
So there's three things. The first of just continuing to build our studio, and work for the kinds of brands that we want to help serve their audiences. So I always just find that spark 20 years later, and
Mhm.
that's humble. We're getting a lot of interest from very interesting organizations. Two is, I want to finish the hard design book. So just trying to build out that content. And the last one's actually two parts. One is Tales of Khayal. So this is an imaginative comic series that we've just launched. I hope to build that over time and explore, potentially that could be more animation, or that could be a game. But that's going to be a bit of a journey. Allahu alam. And then the final one, we've invested a lot of time the last maybe 6 months in exploring and embracing Web3 tech. So
Mhm.
we've been asked a couple of times to work on NFT projects. We've just been collaborating very closely the last few months on one that I think is really promising, and is already proving to be very high demand. So I think that we'll we, again, it comes back to people, how we serving people, and bringing that like-hearted approach to it, but also knowing that the zeitgeist of the day right now for a lot of people is in the Web3 space, and thinking about
Mhm.
that whole new horizon. How are we bringing our heart-centered approach to Web3? That's the
Yeah.
big question.
Definitely. And I'm excited to see the answer, inshallah. So where should we lead people who are listening to this if they want to learn more about you, they want to support your work, or they might even want to work with you and get your support for their business?
Yeah, cool. Just look me up, Peter Gould. There's actually two Peter Goulds. The other one's Academy Award winning who wrote Breaking Bad. I'm not that one. He's the Hollywood guy. Although we follow each other on Twitter and sometimes retweet, which is kind of fun and confusing for everyone else.
Nice.
Just look me up. Usually on LinkedIn is the best place. I post there usually once a week, and Instagram, and then you'll find the web links from there.
Okay, awesome. So make sure to go ahead and check that out. We'll also include the links in the episode notes and description, guys, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to go ahead and check that out. And there is a question that I ask every single guest on this podcast before we wrap up the episode. And I'm going to ask you the same. If you could give one piece of advice for your 18-year-old self, and that's, going to grow up and go through this whole journey of entrepreneurship and this whole journey of life, you would give him one piece of advice, something that he could hold on to throughout his journey, what would you tell him?
18-year-old me? Well, I hadn't quite encountered Islam fully at that point. So I would have to say to 8-year-old me, like, Bismillah, keep going. Yeah. And I wouldn't know what that word is, but I would have looked out for that word. And Bismillah is a very beautiful and encapsulates a lot of what we should be thinking about, I think, in entrepreneurships.
I love that. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Peter. It was an absolutely amazing episode and a beautiful discussion. I look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you.
And you guys know the drill. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to go leave a rating and review of the podcast. Show us your support. And you can follow Ummahpreneur on any social media platform. Just search up Ummahpreneur. We'll drop the links for our guest, Brother Peter Gould, as well in the description, which you can go ahead and support and follow. And of course, if you'd like our support with your business, go check out ummahpreneur.com for all the resources we have available. And until then, we'll see you in the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.